and welcome back to another Giant Slayer TFT patch rundown video. Today I'll be breaking down the latest TFT patch 11.16. This arrives 1 week later than normal as 11.15 was extended. We'll be covering all the relevant changes to the meta, but we do recommend checking out the patch notes to be fully up to date on everything that changed. With all that said, let's go ahead and get started. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come. Be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. As there's no system adjustments in this patch, we can dive right into the trait changes. As usual, we can't have a set 5 patch without changes to Abomination. After being nerfed soon after release, Abomination took some time off before players realized it was still quite good. From there, the meta became dominated once again by Abomination, particularly during Stage 3 and 4. Naturally, this means it's time for the nerf bat. The largest number adjustment is to the monstrosity scaling per stage, as it's going down from 20% to 16%. Keep in mind this will affect all of the stats the monstrosity gains, so there's less of a jump in power between each stage of the game. The other two changes are much milder, as the health of the Abomination is going from 1000, 1400, 1800 to 900, 1400, 1900. Basically, this reduces the effectiveness of 3 Abomination and makes high rolling the emblem a bit more impactful late game. The second change is to health per star level, which has a similar cadence with the numbers going from 100, 140, 180 to 90, 140, 190. Again, same idea. Nerf early, buff the high roll. All in all, these are mostly nerfs across the board for Abomination. Reducing the scaling will hurt in the long term, but with the correct items, it should still be playable. Next, we have a rework to Legionnaire. Legionnaires will now heal for a portion of the damage they deal with attacks and abilities. This is different from before, as previously they only healed after the first attack when casting an ability. Now it's each attack and their ability, overall increasing the amount healed. As for the attack speed buff, this is unchanged with the same numbers as before. But instead of healing for 50% of the damage, the new stats are 15, 20, 25, 35% Omnivamp. Keep in mind this is healing per attack, so even if the numbers are lowered for Draven, it is more consistent healing. The Omnivamp is quite good for Legionnaire that deal bonus magic damage like Yasuo. But the big one is that Kayle can actually heal with Legionnaire now. Maybe we'll see her be viable for the first time, as she's been struggling since the mid-set came out. Moving along, we've got a lot of smaller number adjustments to cover, beginning with Cannoneer. Cannoneer isn't egregiously overpowered by any means, but 2 Cannoneer is a bit too good for Tristang and Lucian. Thus, they're lowering the attack damage scaling down to 225% from 250%. The other tiers remain the same, so don't worry about 4 Cannoneer being nerfed. As for 2, this tones down how good the trait can be for so little investment. So if you want the same bang for your buck, you may want to consider playing 4 Cannoneer. Next is a nerf to Hellions. Tristang has taken over the meta. Being part of a reroll comp means towing a balance line that cannot be crossed, and Tristang jumps across that line quite often. Early Hellions are being buffed, but the later scaling is going down, with the attack speed going to 10, 30, 70, 130% from 5, 30, 75, 150%. Buff 2 Hellions so they're better to splash in and reduce the value of late game Hellions, making Tristang less of a problem after being 3-starred. Overall, these changes look decent, as Hellions should be at their strongest early on in the game and fall off a bit later. Lightbringer is the surprising synergy that rose up in the meta near the end of 11.15. Why that is due to the scaling of the trait. At the upper tiers, the damage and scaling is a bit ridiculous, so high rolling into 8 Nightbringer was potentially an easy way to secure a top 2. To address this, they've lowered the shield scaling down to 200% from 250% at 8 Nightbringer. In addition to that, damage scaling is down to 70% from 80%. The shield certainly took the largest hit, but overall these nerfs should lower the ridiculousness of late game Nightbringers for players that were lucky enough to find the emblem. And the last relevant trait change is to Sentinels, as the bonus attack speed for 3 is going to 25% from 30%. Not massive, but as we always say, be aware that any adjustment to attack speed can be quite impactful due to scaling. Will this make early Sentinel disappear from the meta? No, but it does lower their value slightly. With traits done, we can move on to champion changes. Starting off with tier 1 champions, we have a buff to Leona. It's only due her initial starting mana, as it's going up to 4080 from 080. Honestly, Leona wasn't exactly in need of buffs, it's more that knights in general just aren't cutting it compared to other forms of frontline. It's a nice buff, but likely won't lead to anything. Olaf is a bit too survivable for a 1-cost champion between his own healing, the shield from skirmishers, and the potential shield from Sentinel. To address this, they're lowering his healing per basic attack down to 20-30-70% from 25-35-75%. They could have left tier 3 alone since no one rerolls for Olaf 3, but toning down the other 2 tiers does make a lot of sense. And the last 1 cost being changed is Vayne with a good old 5 attack damage buff with it going from 30 to 35. It's the classic, we're not sure what to buff, so let's add 5 damage balance change that we see time after time in TFT. It may help her be playable, but a 5 damage buff can be anywhere from meaningless to game-breaking. Only time in games will tell which it is. On to 2-cost champions, with Sejuani taking a big hit to their defensive stats her ability gains. The armor and magic resist is going down to 60, 100, 200 from 80, 125, 250. These are fairly significant number changes and will result in Sejuani being a lot less tanky. To be fair, she does have a 3rd synergy now, Brawler, which added bonus health on top of the defensive stats she gained, so a nerf like this is definitely in order. Thresh, you do too much damage for a support champion. Not to mention his stun pulls and lasts a long time. Thankfully, they're finally addressing this champion by nerfing his damage down to 175, 350, 800 from 200, 400, 1000. Maybe they went a bit soft on the changes, but any nerf to Thresh is going to make a lot of players happy. What's that? Another 5 damage attack buff? This time, it's to Varus, and his attack damage is going from 60 to 65. For Varus, this is much more relevant considering his auto attacks actually matter, so it may help raise his value a bit in the meta. Unfortunately, we haven't seen any champion take the place of Pantheon yet, so Bulldozer is still on hiatus. For the more significant 2-cost changes, we have a nerf to Tristana. First off, keep in mind they already nerfed the scaling of Hellions and damage of 2 Cannoneer. On top of those nerfs, which affect Tristana, they're lowering her ability's attack speed to 120, 130, 140% from 125, 150, 175%. Tier 1 and 2 shouldn't be noticeably worse, but it is a significant nerf to 3-star Tristana. Putting all these nerfs together, we may see Tristana reroll fall out of the meta entirely. She'll still be fine early game as an item carry, but multiple nerfs to her late game make rerolling for her a risky strategy. The other 2 significant changes is to Aurelia, once again having her damage reduction targeted. It's now down to 30, 40, 50% base reduction from 40, 50, 60%. In addition to that, she's also losing 5 attack damage, going down to 60. Okay, yes, Aurelia and early Sentinel Skirmisher is very strong, but they do seem to be going a bit too hard on nerfing her. She's been a fun addition to the set, so hopefully they don't nerf her out of the meta entirely. Nocturne is getting major changes based around the idea that he was hard to balance. To fix that issue, they've made it so the spin his ability does now deals bonus physical damage and scales with ability power, which they removed for his healing. A lot of his numbers have changed, but the breakdown is the overall base damage that his ability does is going down, and you can now use AP to increase it. The healing he receives won't scale anymore, so it's now a flat 100%, and lastly, the attack speed buff is going from 30, 35, 40% to a flat 35%. There's a lot changed here, so the best piece of advice is to try him out and see how the changes feel. Being able to scale his damage with AP does open the door for interesting itemization, so keep an eye out for things like Death Cap potentially being viable on him. As for the more minor 3-cost changes, we have 2 small nerfs to Lee Sin. Neither are impactful, with one being a 50 damage nerf to his ability at tier 3. The other increases his mana to 80 from 70, which does lower his value. Still, Lee Sin should be just fine. Riven is getting a nerf at tier 3 with the bonus attack damage going down to 120% from 130%. And of course, she also receives a 5 damage adjustment going from 85 to 80. Overall, Riven is still a fantastic early item holder, but we may see less Riven 3s in the late game. Yasuo gets slapped by the nerf bat, mainly targeting his 3-star numbers. The base damage is going down by 50 at tier 3, with the true damage on hit going down by 5. Not too significant, but it will make him a bit worse late game. Keep in mind that they did rework Legionnaire, so the full extent of those changes is currently unknown. Yasuo may have gotten better or worse based on the rework. Rel is the best champion in the game, so they've lowered her health from 950 to 900. A nerf she likely deserved, though it is nice seeing Rel just be super strong all set. Galio is getting much larger changes. The healing from his ability is going to 60% from 50%, the duration up to 2.5 seconds from 2, and the damage is now 200, 300, 1200 from 200, 300, 2000. Obviously, a 3-star Galio isn't particularly relevant to balance, but it's nice to see him gain some buffs to his kit in general. Galio can be really good with items, so hopefully these buffs help keep him relevant when you aren't itemizing him. Karma is not good. Or should we say, wasn't good, as they're buffing her damage to 225 to 8750 from 210 to 6700. Is that enough to bring her back into the meta? Probably not, but a buff is a buff, so players will likely test her out. The last 4 cost changes are to Lucian. First off, his health is going down to 700 from 800. It seems drastic, but is meant to remove the mathematically correct way of playing Sentinels, which was to leave the tankier champions at 1 star so Lucian receives an initial shield and attack speed buff. It definitely hurts the survivability though. Health aside, the real major change is that culling now counts as an attack. This means it works with on-hit type items like Shiv, Rageblade, Hurricane, etc. It's a huge buff to his ability and likely will have to see balance adjustments in future patches if it turns out to be too good of an alteration. As for the 5 cost balance changes, most of them are very small number adjustments. The only change we'll mention here is Volibear stun is going down to 2 seconds from 2.5 at tier 1. Not a massive change, but it is worth noting. For the rest of the changes, we recommend reading the patch notes, but as we said, it's mainly a bunch of smaller number tweaks. The last section to cover is item changes. There's a lot of adjustments, most of which are subtle number changes. We'll be covering the most relevant, so we again recommend reading the patch notes if you're interested in all of the changes. Green Sue's Reckoning, the Radiant item, is gaining a new bonus of 30% attack speed. This should help make this item relevant in the meta, as previously it was one of the worst Radiant items to get. Regular Quicksilver is getting a substantial increase to the immunity timer, going from 12 to 15 seconds. While it is a big buff, there really hasn't been a need for CC immunity in this set. Remember Verdant? Yeah. Plus Banshee's Claw is just overall better, so even this buff may not be enough to make Quicksilver relevant. And the last item we'll be covering today is the Sunfire Cape. Sunfire Cape has been a staple early game item, but maybe it's just been a bit too good. So they've lowered the burn damage from 25% max health to 20%, along with the duration going down to 8 seconds from 10. While these are clear nerfs, keep in mind it was one of the most commonly made early game items. It shouldn't always be the best option, so nerfs should help make other items more relevant. Plus, Morellonomicon may be a worthwhile investment now since it's been overshadowed by Sunfire for quite some time. That's going to be it for today's video, folks. The mid-set has been doing well in terms of balance. While there are definitely nerfs in this patch, in general, it seems the goal was to bring up lesser played traits, champions, and items. Overall, a good-looking patch. Let us know in the comment section below what you're the most excited for. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.